Next up, we have some topics that are near and dear to my heart. We have communications and education. We will start off with, first of all, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this session, Bickerstaff Heath. Thank you again for your support. We will be starting with Janet Rummel of the North Texas Municipal Water District. She is the Public Relations and Communications Officer. She has 17 years of experience in public relations for water utilities, including over a decade at Colorado Springs Utilities before she joined the North Texas Municipal Water District in 2015. Now she helps this district navigate tricky situations and get stakeholders on board, even building an entire lake. I can't wait to hear all about the project she's going to tell you about. And it looks like we have Janet's screen. We have her on camera, and I'll pass it over to you. Welcome, Janet.
Well, thank you. I appreciate everyone having me be a part of this. This is really exciting. I'm going to share my screen with you now. So hopefully you're seeing my slides and hearing me okay. And I'll get started. So as Julia mentioned, I work for the North Texas Municipal Water District, and I'm going to talk to you today about effective public relations, and hopefully we'll give you some pointers on some things that you might be able to take back to your organizations based on some experiences I'll share with you today. The title of my presentation is Keeping Things Flowing versus Slowing. And I'm going to give you some examples of that here in a minute. But I'll first start talking, or first tell you a little bit about the North Texas Municipal Water District and who we serve and what our operations are all about. Talk about the definition of public relations, how it can build trust and facilitate progress, share some myths about public relations, and then the two examples that I mentioned, a couple of projects where we had reactive communications or public relations versus proactive, and what the difference in the results were for those two projects. And then just kind of wrap up with some tips about how PR can help your next project and general tips on water communications that I found helpful over the years. Okay, so NTMWD, the regional wholesale provider of water, wastewater, and solid waste services. We serve water to nearly 80 communities on a daily basis in the communities north and east of the Dallas metro area. That service area covers 2,200 square miles, and we're in 10 counties with 1.8 million people served today, and that's continuing to grow, just like all of Texas seems to be growing. Some of those cities that we serve are often on the fastest growing cities in the nation list. We see those headlines come out all the time. And so what we have is a very important job, just like all of you do in serving your communities. So a few statistics about our infrastructure. We've got 18 major water pump stations, and then 6 water treatment plants with a total capacity of over 806 million gallons per day. And we're adding a 7th water treatment plant as part of our new reservoir called Bodark Lake. So we're excited to bring that online in the next couple of years. We've got nearly 600 miles of large water transmission pipelines in our system today. And where we get our water, in case you're interested in where our water comes from, Lavon Lake is really the workhorse of our system in Wiley, where our headquarters is located. We also get water from Lake Texoma up on the Oklahoma border, Lake Tawakoni, and then Chapman Lake, also known as Cooper. And then we have a man-made wetland reuse project where we filter water from the Trinity River and pipe that water back up to Lavon Lake for future use, treatment, and reuse. And then, as I mentioned, we're building a new lake in Fannin County, along with a new water treatment plant. And that's going to come online in 2022. So we're really excited about that large project getting completed soon. So how we communicate with people in our area, because we're the wholesale provider, we work with our cities a lot on our communication. and our cities vary in their makeup and their population. Plano, which is our largest member city, has more than 285,000 residents and growing. And then on the smaller end of the spectrum, Farmersville, which is our smallest member city, has a population of just over 3,300 people. So each, with this gamut of size and scope of the cities that we serve, their messaging and resources vary. We tend to be of extreme help to those smaller communities who often don't have communications staff to help them. So we always think about how we might be able to help them better. But all of those factors kind of drive our communications planning. And then the other factor that we look at is most of the consumers in our area know us from our conservation education campaigns. We've got a really robust conservation program here at the district in partnership with our cities. That's how we normally directly communicate with our consumers, and also with the cities sharing those messages as well. But that direct relationship, as far as that direct connection, we don't have that with the end user as much as the cities do, since that's who serves them on the local level. So now I'm going to shift into the main point of the conversation today that I was asked to talk to you about was public relations, and hopefully, like I mentioned, that this will offer you some insight into some examples of our experiences and how you might take some of that back to your organization's efforts. But the Public Relations Society of America, PRSA, they define public relations as strategic communication process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between organizations and their public. It sounds really simple, but the key words here are strategic relationships, and that's what public relations really is all about. And if you're doing it properly, effectively, it can build trust. It demonstrates transparency, which is an expectation more and more of the public every day. It minimizes misunderstandings. Misunderstandings can slow you down. That's one of the reasons projects and initiatives can slow down, because people just don't understand maybe what you're trying to achieve. It can facilitate progress, and it really involves the whole team. It's not just one person or one group in an organization, but it's a lot of different people within your organization working together to support the public relations, which has a direct impact on how people in the public perceive your organization. I thought I would come up with a few myths that I've heard over the years in conversations about public relations. Maybe some of you have heard these or thought these before, so see if any of these sound familiar to you. We don't have time to communicate. We've got a schedule to maintain. We always got to stay on schedule because time is money. So if we have public relations, that could just slow us down. We don't have budget to communicate or advertise. Many might think that it takes a big expensive budget to do effective communications, but there's a lot of simple things that just involve communicating strategically with the public that don't involve costly tools or resources. If we communicate, it will just slow us down, or people may think that this means that they can change our plans, and we've got a plan and we're moving forward. Sometimes that's a perception that PR will just slow things down. We've been operating for decades just fine without PR involved, and I think this might be common to a lot of utilities where we're not really thought about. We're kind of behind the scenes making things happen. The public may not be probably isn't thinking about all the ways that we're making sure that they have the water that they need, the resources that they need in their communities. But more and more people are expecting that their utilities and their water districts communicate with them about what they're doing and what their plans are. we've always done it this way. Why change now? That applies to a lot of topics, not just public relations. And we don't see a role for PR on this issue. We'll let you know if we need anything, and maybe you can do a news release when we're done. A lot of folks think of PR as just the media side of things, or putting out a news release or an article. But there's so much more to it, and hopefully with the examples I'm about to share with you, you will see some of those. So I'm going to first start out when I do my tale of two projects with a reactive public relations example on a project that we've been working on in recent years. This one is a new water operations center. It's really the heart of our regional water system operations. It's where our control room is, where we move water into our water treatment plants from our various water sources, and move water within the water treatment plants, and then out to our communities. So it's really the heart of those operations is located in this building. But our current building was built in the 1950s, so it is time for an upgrade, well past time for an upgrade. We need a more modern building, more modern equipment for the technology that's needed. And then also, as we've experienced in recent years, some major storm events, including an event where we had softball-sized hail a few years ago, and water pouring into the facility. We need it to be hardened for those types of storm events, so that we can continue to do our work even in the face of an emergency like that, storm event like that. This facility is being built on land that the North Texas Municipal Water District owns, adjacent to our existing water treatment plant. So this parcel, because it's owned by NTMWD, but it was zoned for a different use, the team needed to go to the local city council to get approval for rezoning of that parcel so that we could move forward with the plans for this facility. And our engineering team worked really close with the city planning staff to comply with all the local ordinances and codes, and make sure that we were building it in the right way to fit within the city guidelines. And those plans seemed really straightforward. Nothing controversial here. It's just a building, operations building. I will note that public relations was not involved in advance of the council meeting where the council was considering approval of this zoning change. And when the team went to present to the city council, they began to hear about the neighbors adjacent to the property were concerned and had raised those concerns to several city council members. And the result was that the council voted no on the zoning change. And that really threw off our plans that we had in place, and staff was very surprised by that opposition. It was not expected. And what were some of the neighbors' concerns that we learned about? They were concerned about traffic on the roads outside of their neighborhood, what that traffic was going to do to their roads and the road conditions, safety concerns about that additional traffic, and then also around the amount of chemicals that would be stored on site. They know that we store a lot of chemicals on our water treatment plant, and they wanted to know more about what our plans were for chemical storage on a property that was just outside their neighborhood. They were also concerned about their privacy. They wanted to know more about the height of the building. Was it going to be 2-story, and where the workers could see down in their backyard? And there was just a lot of misinformation and rumors about what was being built there and what kinds of activities were going to be going on there. So public relations team was brought in to help the team work on an outreach plan so that we could get the project back on track, back on schedule. And the first place we started was developing the support materials. Always recommend that you get those good support materials in place with all the information that you know that you're going to need to address. Get that all organized and presented in a really good way before you start conducting your outreach. We developed a fact sheet on the project and a dedicated page on our website for it, so we could point people to that for more information. We also developed a presentation with better visuals so that they could really better visualize what this facility was going to look like outside of their neighborhood, and make sure that we address those concerns that they have. We offer tours and briefings to the city council members in advance of also hosting some open houses for the neighbors, working with that HOA in that neighborhood, and continue to provide ongoing email updates to the neighbors about the progress and plans for this facility. We dedicated a point person on the PR team to be their point of contact for questions. That really freed up the time of the project team, and then we could track down the information that the neighbors needed. And this is a photo of one of the open houses that we had. So the end result, while we did get the change that we needed and get to move forward the project, there was a result of the delay in that getting that approval from the city council, and it ended up being a 1-year impact on the schedule, and also the associated costs increase with that, because it did take extra time to adjust the plan somewhat, and we had to terminate the original construction contract because that contractor had other work to move on to. They couldn't wait around for our project to get approval since it was going to be delayed. So we had to conduct a whole new procurement process. But we did, it was a success in that we did finally get the approved zoning change that we needed. And the public relations also allowed, like I mentioned, the project team to focus on their work and the technical side of things, the construction itself. It did build better understanding with the council members and the neighbors about what we do, and that was a real benefit. The neighbors really appreciated the quick response to their questions, and now we're on schedule for completion, and staff is going to be moving in after the first of the year, so that's really exciting. I know our operators, our control room operators, are super excited to get out of their 1950s era building and into this new modern facility. But one of the key points I wanted to make about this is, if you're not doing that advanced communication, then what can happen is the story, maybe in the media or in the public, will be that you didn't inform the public. And instead, you want your story to be about the actual project or initiative that you're taking on. So you never want your story to be the decisions that you made or didn't make, and notifying the public in advance, because that can just take over the conversation, rather than what you really want to be talking about is the need for the facility and why it's important, or the need for your initiative and why it's important. And that would just be a distraction from that. So now I'm going to share with you another example of a different project. This is an example of proactive public relations and what those results were, in contrast with the example I just gave you. This is a wastewater treatment plant, a regional water resource recovery facility that we are planning in the northern part of our service area, where we've got a lot of growth and need additional capacity by 2023. It's going to be about a $500 million project on a 1,000-acre site, 16 MGD initial capacity, but the permit that we applied for from the TCEQ is for discharging up to 64 MGD from this new facility once we expand it. And that TCEQ permit that we had to apply for did require notifications to the adjacent landowners as part of that standard public process. Some of the issues and concerns that we knew we would face with this project is the fact that this facility won't provide wastewater service to the adjacent neighbors. They are on septic systems, and they do receive regional treated drinking water from us through their to the customer entity that serves them in that area, but they don't receive wastewater service from us. So there was not really a benefit to them from this facility, so that poses a challenge. There's also a lot of misconceptions about wastewater treatment plants, and we anticipated a lot of common concerns that we were going to need to address up front, like odor control, the views from the neighboring properties, lighting, noise, traffic, questions about property values, what this would do to their property values. So we were prepared for those types of questions. In this case, the public relations team was brought on board to talk with the team, the project team, well in advance from the very beginning. And we did, again, start with developing those support materials, a fact sheet, frequently asked questions. Those frequently asked questions not only help the public, but also it helps all of the team who will be talking with the public to make sure everyone's on the same page and has the same standard answers that they're delivering, so that people don't get confused or get mixed messages from different people on the team. We also developed a dedicated page on our website for this, and presentations and displays that address those common concerns that I just mentioned. And we really wanted to make sure that they heard from us ahead of when they got that notification from the TCEQ. So we prepared a letter to go with our fact sheet that we developed, and got the addresses for all those parcels and sent all of the adjacent neighbors the introduction from our organization, rather than them getting a notice from TCEQ and hearing about it for the first time in that way with somewhat of a form letter. We wanted to explain a little bit more about what it was that we were doing and how they could get more information on our website. And then we also let them know that we were going to plan open houses, which we did a couple of open houses for the residents in that area. We gave presentations to the local city councils and government agencies as part of our outreach. And then meeting with government officials, this is outside of city limits. It's more in the county area, so we wanted to make sure our county commissioners were informed as well, so that they would be prepared to answer questions from their constituents. And the results, it was a huge success. There was only one comment submitted to the TCEQ, and it actually was a comment that could be addressed by our team. It wasn't related to the permit itself, and that led to us receiving our permit well earlier than what was anticipated. That allowed us to apply for the state funding through the Texas Water Development Board for that low interest financing that's going to save us over $160 million on the financing for the project. So that's a huge win for all of those that we serve in our communities, being able to move forward with that project in that way. We're beginning construction this fall and already planning the next phase of our outreach because we know those property owners nearby will start to see some activities when we begin the construction, and we want to make sure that they hear about that in advance and they're not caught off guard. So our work is not done. We continue. So now I've just got a couple of wrap-up slides to point out some key tips, I guess, some key takeaways for you before we talk about, take your questions. But how can PR help with your next project? First, I wanted to share with you this quote from Stephen Covey. You may have heard of, you may have read some of his books. I know I have. One of the ones that's my favorite is called The Speed of Trust. And this graphic really kind of gets to that with this quote, which is kind of relative to what I just talked about. You know, when you build that trust, you interact with less friction, and that results in greater speed and lower cost. And I think that that really speaks to what we experienced with the difference between the reactive public relations that still got us to the finish line with that project. But had we maybe come in earlier on the project, we could have maybe saved some time and some cost for our customers versus the other project that I shared with you, where the team did come in on the front end and was able to really have a big win, getting to the finish line well in advance of what was anticipated, saving our customers a lot of money in the process. So again, that speaks to this first point: involve your PR staff from the start. Don't wait till there's a problem. It's a lot more work to come in after things may go wrong, and you've got to kind of play catch up. And then also you may have eroded some trust already with your publics if you're not doing it proactively. And then everyone on the team has a role. So there were people on the leadership team who they were the point of contact for the county commissioner The project manager, has a role in communicating at the open houses. So everyone on the team contributes to public relations. It's not really just one person's job. It's everyone with your public relations staff or consultant maybe helping to guide you all. And then another bit of advice is to think like the public. Who will be impacted by your initiative or your project, and what would you want to know about it if it was affecting you or in your backyard? And don't forget about your employees or your elected officials or community leaders. I mean, some of this may be common sense and you're already doing this routinely, but employees are one in particular that sometimes they find out about things later in the process. And what questions will they receive? Think about that from that standpoint and make sure you're arming them with information in advance before they receive those questions, because that can really demonstrate that you care and you thought about them in advance, that you were looking out for them and you didn't want them to be put in a position where they were caught off guard by a question, because that can sometimes create some bad relationships as well. And then to take back your time, let your PR staff help so others can focus on their jobs. They can be the point of contact, the incoming point for the public to find out answers from the project team. But that really frees up the project team's time or leadership's time if you have those questions coming in through a main central point of contact with your PR team. And then this is some of the biggest advice that I could give to you all as leaders and board members is allow your public relations staff to listen to discussions because they can listen for things that are and look out for things from the public perception through their lens. And if you empower them to speak up and actually seek out their advice or their perspective on a particular issue, sometimes that can be very enlightening to a conversation before a board makes a decision or before leaders move forward with a decision. There are adjustments that might be able to be made that don't really cost much to the organization, but could avoid a lot of headache and slowdowns in the end. So your PR professionals can give you that perspective and help flag those things for you if you will involve them and allow them to be part of your leadership team. And then finally, my last few tips to share with you is just on general water communications. Something that I think more and more water providers are doing and very successfully is personalizing the message and the organization. Put a face on your organization, that you are part of the communities where you serve, your people too. You're not just this faceless organization with a government sounding name, that you care and what you do, you care about what you do and you want to do it right. And it's because maybe you're a customer too, or your employees are customers too. So if that's the case in your situation, highlight that for people. It makes that connection much more personal. If they understand that, hey, these are your neighbors working on behalf of you, providing these essential services that you rely on every day. And then also to use common language. We all kind of get into a habit of using our water industry speak with acronyms and terms that are all very familiar to those of us who've been in the business for a while. And it's easy to let those slip into our communications. But I always use this test. Would your mom or your neighbor understand it? So that's a good test of your communications to make sure that it's coming across as you intend it to. And another tip for that is to seek feedback from an outside perspective, even your public relations staff, because we work with this information on such a regular basis, and we start to pick up on our utility speak, our water language, lingo. We may even kind of miss that we're speaking about something in terms that aren't understandable to the lay person. So show some of your communications to somebody from the outside of your organization and ask them, what's their takeaway when they read it? Do they understand it? Did we miss something important? They have questions after they read it. What's missing? So it's a good tip. And then does it communicate the headline or the story that you want? It may be chock full of all kinds of really good facts and figures and stats, but did it really deliver the key takeaway that you want delivered? I know that I've experienced it before. You put out a news release or you put out an article, mostly, news release, you send something to the media, and then you take a look at the headline that they wrote and you think, how did they come up with that out of what I sent them? Because it just didn't resonate with them, or it didn't maybe hit home the key point that you really wanted to hit home. So try to be cognizant of that as well. Fewer words and more visuals. So many people are just so busy these days and scan through information. So the more that you can convey things using visuals instead of so much narrative, people just don't take the time to read as much narrative as they used to. So visuals are really helpful with key numbers and photos showing what you want to convey. Get ideas from other organizations. How are they communicating similar topics? I know that I have done this on water quality communications when we've got a real complex water quality communications challenge. I looked at other utilities around the country to see what were they doing, how were they describing something, how were they explaining some really complex concept, and then borrowing ideas from that. Hey, that was a really great way that they stated that. We're all, kind of one family here, and everyone is trying to achieve similar things. And so there's no shame in borrowing great ideas from our peers. I encourage it, and I welcome anyone to take a look at what we do and see if there's anything that might be beneficial to you as well. Ask yourself who needs to know. Make sure you're not missing a key audience in your communications. And like I mentioned before, keep those employees informed. They're sometimes your best ambassadors. If they're standing in line at the grocery store in town and someone knows that they work for your organization and they ask a question, your employee may not be intimately involved in that topic, but it sure is nice if they actually generally have a little bit of awareness of what your organization's doing with regard to that topic, and can point the person to the right information and where they can find it. So keep your employees informed, and they like to know how they fit into the big picture of what you're doing at your organizations. And then don't wait for a crisis to communicate. Start now building that trust so that the first time you're communicating with a particular audience, that it's not in the midst of a crisis. You don't want that to be your first impression, the first time that they're hearing from you. So see if you can build that trust along the way. And then when they hear about you, when there's a crisis, you've already established some credibility with them and some relationship with them. And then finally, the best PR is the actions we take. That's sort of been a mantra of mine working for water utilities over these years. That really the best PR is decisions and the actions that you take. You can overcome maybe questionable decisions or questionable actions with effective PR, but it gives you such a great, better story to tell, a much stronger story to tell if you're making sure you avoid those issues on the front end. And again, that goes back to involving your PR professionals in some of the planning discussions and getting that perspective, because you might be able to make some minor adjustments to your plans to take that into consideration and just avoid a lot of slowdowns along the way, and then just really be able to demonstrate that you thought about that public perception even when you were planning whatever initiative or project that you're working on. So with that, that was all I had to share with you, and now I'll take any questions, I guess. Julia's going to tell me questions.
Appreciate it. So we did have a few questions come in. So for GCDs that only have one employee, no set PR staff, just so one person wearing many hats, how would you adapt your advice for those folks who aren't delegating out to a staff, but
Right.
themselves?
That's a good. I'm glad you asked that question because I meant to mention it in my comments, because I know there are some that don't have a large staff. There are PR consultants that are small, just one person consultants that can do a really good job for low cost. If you have a major initiative, so I would recommend bringing in someone like that, or maybe having someone that you can just go to in a time of need during a peak time. There's also, maybe an opportunity to partner with a local college student who might want to just get some experience and do some part-time work on the side as needed. So those are a couple of ideas. I don't know if that helps.
Okay, great, thank you. Since some of your strategies like open houses and outreach presentations are not always possible right now in the age of COVID, how should the communication strategy change in response to that?
Okay, another good question. We've actually had to adapt. We held our first virtual public information meeting in June for a treated water pipeline that we're constructing. And it actually worked very well. There's a number of different tools, like this is GoToMeeting, but we actually used a Zoom webinar feature. It's relatively inexpensive, and it allows you to have panelists, presenters, and then take questions like we're experiencing here with this conference. So it actually is very helpful because you can control the conversation a little bit better, manage the questions. And then we had a moderator who, just like what Julie is doing now, collected the questions and then posed those back to the appropriate person on the panel. And then also committed to capturing all the questions and posting more information on our website to address those. So that's a fairly low cost, easy way to host a public meeting. And you can get the word out through Nextdoor or just through your local newspapers to advertise how they can go online and register to participate in something like that. And we're about to have another one tomorrow night on another project in McKinney. So it'll be our second time to try it, and hopefully it'll go just as well as the first one did.
That's good. So you actually just mentioned something that was a question that I had. When you talked about that first project where all these people suddenly showed up to the city council meeting with an issue with your permit, I envisioned that probably took place on Nextdoor or a Facebook neighborhood group or something where someone found out and told everyone else to get mad about it.
Yeah.
What is your thought on those groups, and do you engage with them? Do you think you should have a proactive presence on there as well?
Well, a couple things. We try to belong to groups that will allow us to belong to them. So you have, some of them are closed groups that you have to join, and so we've been successful with some of them. But Nextdoor is one of those where we haven't been able to get a Nextdoor account. So we had to work with our the county public information officer to get information out to county residents, and then our city PIOs for the city information. So we send information out to them, and then they can post that. It is good to monitor those if you can, if you have people that you know that belong to those groups that can flag those concerns for you, so that you know what people are talking about that you might not be aware of. But we try to use that to reach out. There's another example. There's a group up in Fannin County who is posting about our lake project, and we have reached out to the administrator of that Facebook page and asked her to post things on our behalf. So it's not us posting below their information that they have shared with their group, but she will share and say, this is from the North Texas Municipal Water District. They wanted me to share this with you. And that seems like that helps, having that relationship with the administrator of the page, if they're willing to share information on your behalf.
Great, thanks. How do you get the public to pay attention when you're trying to be proactive? When they don't have a reason to watch?
When they don't have a reason to watch. Well, I guess, we just try to do our best to work. I mean, I guess it just depends on the topic. Usually we try to share things with folks that we know will have an interest. But I guess, like, for example, conservation campaigns, we try to connect it to what something that they will relate to. Like, for example, the best way to manage their water bill is through watching how much they're watering their lawns, or that type of information. So I guess just trying to connect it to something that they will care about, and then finding ways to get that in front of them, whether it's, there's a lot of publications that will go straight, that are mailed straight to somebody's mailbox. We have publications like that. Find out what those outlets are that most people are paying attention to. Sometimes there's just a little local community newspaper, and they'll print anything that you send them. Establish relationships with those, and then you can deliver information that way, even through advertising. That usually those smaller newspapers, it's pretty low cost to do that. But I guess always just trying to connect it to something that they will care about. They're something that they're paying for, or water quality, things like that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Janet. We appreciate you being here. And we hope you'll stick around we have a happy hour later. If anyone has any questions, you might be able to find Janet, and we'll provide you with her contact information as well. Thank you so much, Janet.
Thank you so much.